Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this great webinar where we're going to be talking about the importance of peer-to-peer engagement and how you can use virtual communities to increase the opportunity for that type of interaction, particularly for online and non-traditional students, and some of the amazing benefits that you get by providing that opportunity for your learners. My name is Katie Kapler. I am the co-founder and CEO of InScribe. And I'll come back to that in a second, but I want to take a second to introduce my colleague, Danielle Bonner, who is also joining us today. Danielle manages all of our sales and marketing operations, and she will be helping to facilitate the webinar, keeping an eye on the chat. And as I always say, is fully empowered to interrupt me as I go, because I do tend to get on a roll. And we would, our goal is really to make this session today a conversation. So we welcome your observations, your questions along the way, and we'll make sure that we kind of weave them into the narrative as we go and address them along the way. I also want to introduce two other folks who were not able to join us today, but you may have already spoken with or might hear from them following the webinar. Fred Scott and Carolyn Carter from our account executive team. So just be on the lookout. They're a great resource if you have follow-up questions about InScribe, if you want to do a custom demo, anything that you want to go a little deeper on. They're a great starting place. So look out for any emails or communications from them as well. For those of you who aren't familiar with InScribe, we're a virtual community platform that wraps around the content and curriculum at an institution. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that on the peer use case side. I will say that we actually work across the entire student lifecycle. So we have folks that build communities around enrollment, around academics and learning, around advising and coaching, and also around the sort of student model, which is really communities that are designed for students by students. So we're going to go really deep on that use case today. But if you're somebody who's also thinking, like, how do I improve the velocity and the impact of my enrollment experience, or how do I help scale my faculty members' time when they're trying to support students academically? No, those are also things that we can do. And so feel free to reach out to us if you want to learn a little bit more about how InScribe can be used in those ways as well. But enough about us. We would love to learn about you. So if you have a second, please introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know who you are, what institution you're from. Would love to know what your role is there. And it's always helpful for me to have a sense of, what brought you to the webinar today. Maybe it was you just heard about it through our own InScribe community live event system and it sounded interesting, or if you have a specific challenge or opportunity that you're looking at on your campus. The more I know, the more I can make sure that I weave that into the narrative and address any specific questions that you have. So please let us know. We also recommend that you use the chat versus the Q&A. If you post in Q&A, just know that it's only visible to us, not the other members of our community today. And we're all about kind of being open and sharing, and we want everyone to benefit from the conversation. So chat is the best way to do that. Speaking of which, anything you want me to touch on from chat so far?
We have a quick comment that came in. Our good friend Ozzy here is looking for different ways, or I'm sorry, is looking to find out how InScribe differs from discussion boards.
All right, I love it. Right in with the questions, Ozzy. That's beautiful. We will absolutely talk about that today. Kind of touch on that throughout, and then I'm going to make sure I'll make a note to myself to pause. Let's say 15 minutes into this and make sure that I've really touched on that. And we'll all, we'll obviously look at that in the demo as well. So why are we here? I think student engagement and things like questions around student belonging and student satisfaction have always been a priority for institutions. But they have become an even bigger priority, I think, in the last couple of years, as students have said back to us, here are things that I'm struggling with. Here's the sense of isolation that I'm dealing with. Here are other ways that I need support and engagement from my peers that I haven't had before. I think that the pandemic and sort of all the shifting that has happened since then has really heightened for students and for the people that are supporting them, how sometimes the ecosystem that we build in higher education is actually can be quite fragile. and how there are opportunities to strengthen that and make it more resilient and kind of open up spaces for engagement and collaboration among students who previously we may not have thought particularly wanted or needed it. Specifically, I think about online students or non-traditional students who historically I would hear, well, if I'm learning online or if I'm a student who's commuting to school, I don't actually care that much about interacting with my peers. I just want to get in and get out and get done with it. But actually, when you ask those students, that is something that they very much miss about their education experience and are very much craving. And we know as practitioners is something that can help them be more resilient and persevere. So that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. And hopefully that's something that's top of mind for the folks here. So I mentioned InScribe is a virtual community platform. And so I want to talk a little bit about like why community, why is it important for our students to have access to something like this? Well, as we just touched on, higher education today is not a one-size-fits-all experience. Certainly, there is a large portion of students who are, attending higher ed face-to-face. They are on campus for 4 years or 2 years, but that is not necessarily the experience of the majority of higher ed students. And a lot of them are learning either virtually or asynchronously, or they don't have the luxury of being on campus all the time. They're coming in and out, they're working, they're parenting. And so there's a need to really think about, for this student population, how do we address their needs and help them feel better connected? That set of learners is certainly, and as are our traditional learners, more and more asking for greater flexibility in terms of how they engage with their learning. And that's not just their curriculum and their education, but it's all the support services that wrap around it. I want those to be available on my time, when I need them and where I need them. For those of you who are supporting online learners, there's all kinds of studies, and I'm sure many of you have done these yourselves, about how online can be a very isolating experience. We had one partner who ran a survey and they had, I think it was 80% of their online students never engage with another student outside of what they're prescribed and required to do in the classroom. So think about sort of the isolation that can cause when you're going through this really big life event, right? Learning and all the complications that come with that, and you don't really have a peer network to lean on. We're going to talk about how community really combats that, not only that sense of isolation, but is supportive of things like peer connectedness and belonging, and some of those foundational feelings that students can develop. And that matters because we know that those types of components in an education experience not only have benefits short-term, your students are more likely to persist and succeed while at your institution, they actually also have benefits long-term. So your students are more likely to succeed in their career as they move out of your institution and into their work life. And one of the other nice things about community is it really opens the door for students who often feel who are our most vulnerable. So students who don't have the background on how to navigate higher education, or maybe come with like the strongest sense of imposter syndrome, and I don't really belong here, I'm not going to be able to make it here. Building community around those individuals is often the thing that makes the 100% the difference on whether they're going to be able to succeed or not. Danielle, you paused as if you were going to say something. So.
I was, but I didn't want to interrupt you because you kept going. So
we know each other so well.
I know. Okay. So a lot of what you've said, it can, take place in both the in-person and the online environment, but we do have a quick question in the chat. Do you see digital communities working or benefiting in-person students as well?
Yeah, so if you had asked me that question a year and a half ago, I would have said, really, these are for non-traditional online commuting students. That perspective for me has changed completely in the last year and a half. As we started to work with institutions that were supporting both populations, what the sort of aha moment for me was that even the students who are in person, who have kind of the opportunity to see each other in the hallway or in the cafeteria, for example, the library, there is a large portion of them who also really need and benefit from these virtual spaces. Part of the reason for that is that a virtual space, an asynchronous space, gives the participant a lot more control over how they are going to show up in that community. So if you're live and you have to raise your hand and speak out loud, that is a very high stakes interaction. And there are a huge number of students who don't have the comfort level or the confidence to participate in that way, even if it's Zoom, anything that has that sort of synchronous in-person nature. But a virtual community allows you to take the time to sort of formulate your thought, think about what you're going to say. We'll see in a second that there's some different options that it can present on how you appear in that community. And so what we see is a much larger population of students, even in the in-person space, will start to engage and communicate than if you rely solely on in-person activities. So the short answer is yes, it absolutely can work for both. The long-winded answer is that the benefits are slightly different, although those benefits apply to online as well, but that you're kind of going after a different end case with the in-person students.
Awesome. Well, that's it for now. I just encourage those that are just joining us to please post any questions that you have in the chat. We want to make sure that this is a conversation today and not just us speaking to you. So please go ahead and put your questions in the chat.
Awesome. So we talked a little bit about this. Students want the flexibility to get help when and where they need it. They don't want to have to go to somebody's office. They don't want it to have to be 9 to 5. The other thing that students tell us is they want it to be much more simple. Often when we're supporting learners, there's just like different way, every different department has their own way of doing it, and it became very bifurcated and complicated, and they don't know where to go. And like, if I just have one place I can go to get the information I need, that will save me a tremendous amount of time and mental energy. And then consistently we hear, and this is actually a word students use themselves, is this word authentic. I not only want to talk to the leadership at my institution, but I want to connect with my peers, and I want it to feel not prescribed or forced. I want us to come together and have conversations that are natural and that just make sense for us and for the community that we're a part of. On the institution side, of course, we have to balance all the things that the students need with the reality of what we can do to serve them. So we want to make sure that they're succeeding and persisting. We want them to feel that sense of belonging and to love us. But the reality is, and I'm going to skip to the bottom here, is we have to be able to do that in a cost-effective way. So how do we increase our own efficiency and sort of save time and money while also giving students all this flexibility and personalization that they're seeking? The other in the middle there thing that I think sometimes people even lose sight of is when you give students a space to talk to each other, to ask questions, voice concerns, share ideas, you will be amazed at what you can learn about your student population. And you're not learning about it at the end of the semester, at the end of the year when you run a survey, you're learning about it in real time. And so every institution that we work with will tell us that they use the insights in their community to actually transform content and transform programs and think about other outreach that they can be doing for their learners, because now they really know what students are thinking about, worrying about, and care about, as it shifts over time.
I just want to say, Katie, real quick. So everything you had on that slide there and everything that you've said aligns really nicely to things that we saw in the chat today, the reason why we have so many institutions on the call. So as you think about your message going forward, people are absolutely looking for that sense of belonging. How do we engage students in the digital communities? So I just wanted to note that. Awesome.
Well, good. We're going to talk about the right stuff then. Yes. But we'll definitely hit on each of these. This might feel like, I'm sure everyone in their head can really visualize what a peer or a virtual community is, but a couple of things that I think are really important. So obviously it's virtual. What that really means is that it's always available on demand and it meets students where they are. You'll see in a second that InScribe is also really designed to be integrated into the tools and technology that you are already using. So we don't design it as a separate space that students have to find and go to. We'll put it into your student portal, your websites, your LMS, so students can have one-click access when and where they need it. It is also about creating authenticity and safety for your learners. So it's like encouraging them to go there, supporting them while they're there, and making sure that they really understand that they own this space and can shape it and form it in the way that makes the most sense for them. And last, it's about creating an efficiency on how we deliver information to our learners. So different than email, or even different than a discussion board, which I failed to sort of touch on along the way, even though I said I would. The content that you build in your learning community or your peer community is designed to be reused. So as questions are asked and answered, you're building a living knowledge repository that's constantly updating itself. So students that have similar questions can get the answer they need immediately. They're not having to ask that question again. That creates efficiencies for the people answering those questions. It also means your students are going to find solutions much more quickly. So you're centralizing information, you're making it organically self-generating, and constantly updating based on what your students need. So all super valuable. It is also very much a social space. Particularly these peer communities are about kind of finding your people, finding the place that you fit in. So we'll see in a minute how you can create these subspaces in your community to help affinity groups find each other and have more in-depth, detailed conversations about the things that matter most to them. And with that, oh no, let's talk about the benefits. I was going to jump right into the thing. So I know this is really important to a lot of us. So let me touch on a few of the statistics that we see. So belonging and peer connectedness are obviously top of mind for a lot of people. We did a really amazing research study in partnership with Rio Salado College, which I think Danielle is going to drop a link to that into the chat either now or at some point today. And in that study, we found that students who were participating in Rio's InScribe community demonstrated much higher, 40% higher measures of sense of belonging and peer engagement than those students who did not. And that their sense of belonging, once they started participating in the community, jumped significantly after just 6 weeks. So the community does not need to be in place for an entire year or even an entire semester to have positive benefit. And we can see that the act of participating immediately has that big positive impact on increasing those important measures like peer connection and belonging. It also has a big impact on student satisfaction, which we know is, so I don't know how many of you use Net Promoter Score. I know there's some other measures that are out there, but we did a different study where we found that participation in the community dramatically improves the student's sense of satisfaction with their experience with an institution and the institution overall. Now, all of that, again, has to be balanced against what is cost effective and doable for the institution. And so we have a couple of studies that have shown, in this case, we're citing a study where we found that the use of an InScribe community decreased the load on the institution support team by 23%. We actually have a separate study where that decrease was 80%. So simply by exposing solutions to a large group of people and doing it in a really efficient way, you can give hours back to your support team. And whether that support team are advisors, coaches, faculty, other members of the leadership that are helping students, very consistently give them hours back so that they can spend those hours on higher order activities, high touch engagements that technology can't accomplish, really where you need the humans to step in.
There's a question in the chat. Are you surveying students in the community as well?
We don't post surveys directly in our community unless we are given permission by the institution. These surveys were run out, I believe they were run outside the community, because we did survey students who participated in the community and did not participate. So it was really sent to everybody because we wanted to have an understanding of that delta between the participants and the non-participants.
So I'm unsure, maybe Ozzy's question is in reference to like a survey feature within the community. So Ozzy, if Katie answered your question, let us know in the chat. If not, follow it up with additional questions so that we can make sure it gets answered. Nope, that was the answer. Perfect.
Okay, I was going to say, you can do polls in the community, but that might not be what you're looking for. So Ozzy, just because I said I would, let me go back and talk about it, just hit on a few bullet points about InScribe versus discussion board. So we talked about it's really designed for searchability and reusability. It is not tied to an individual course section. So you don't have to push students into your LMS in order to get them to the community. The community can be accessed from all these other wonderful places. The data that you can pull out of your community will tell you a lot about participation and what students are talking about. That data can be very difficult to draw out of a discussion board. You'll see in a second that the interface feels much more like a social space than I think our LMS discussion boards are really designed to be. And then we'll talk a little bit about Rosie, who's our technology assistant who lives in our communities, and how she can help keep them healthy and happy, which is not something you're going to get from a discussion board. All right, let's look at InScribe. All right. So I'm going to jump over here.
Katie, we have a quick question that just came in as you're transitioning there. Do we ever see any negative behavior in these social spaces?
Yeah, we get that question all the time. And it is a great question. The answer is no, really, we don't. We have some safeguards in place to capture negative behavior if and when it happens, and I'll show you that in a second. But really, I think it's a fair question why you wouldn't see that, because I know we do see that sometimes in other systems and sites. And my best guess is that because InScribe is a school-sanctioned experience, because it is integrated into the other tools that you're using, students understand that it isn't, as opposed to, let's say, using like a Facebook or a Discord, where are these separate spaces that students may be using for other types of activities. There is an expectation that students are bringing their academic selves to these communities. We also can help, it doesn't display right now in this community, but we have an onboarding workflow that students go through where we work with you to post the community norms alongside the welcome to the community. So it's very clear like what the goal of this space is. I would say absolutely the contrary is what we see, which is students being really willing to be vulnerable in these spaces and their peers being 100% supportive of jumping in and saying, you know, you can do this, we got this, we're in it together. It's hard to prove a negative. So I sometimes, some of the best, ways to do that is either to try it out, or if you'd be interested in talking to some of our partners that have been using it, can kind of reiterate their own experience with that, you can let us know and we're happy to make those connections.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so I am, in this example, I am Pippa. I am logged into my students community. I should say that, I mentioned at the very beginning, we do communities that cut across many aspects of the learning life cycle. So it's possible that Pippa has other communities maybe focused on the courses that I'm taking, or to connect with my student success coach or my advisor. Again, we're going to really focus on the peer-to-peer example today. And it's not uncommon for an institution to just start with one type of community. So don't think if you roll out InScribe, you have to have communities across the whole life cycle. It's really, start where you're feeling the pain point the most, but know that you have the opportunity for that expansion with the same tool set over time. Just a quick sort of organizational piece here. So we are now in the Students Connect community, and the communities are primarily organized by topic area. So you can see there's a place to say hello, talk about random stuff, let's chat about our course and coursework. Depending on, when you decide what type of community you want to roll out, we have templates for all of this. So we know what topics have worked really well in the past, but this is all customizable. So if you want to change the design or add something or use the language that's really, specific to your institution, that's totally doable. So Pippa's come in, and so I can see all the content here. And then you can also see that I belong to a couple of channels. Channels are like subgroups in your community. So that's where you can create those affinity group spaces for the types of learners that you might have at your organization. I'm a parent, so I've joined the student parent group, but I can also look at some of the other groups that I might browse and join. Again, this is all 100% customizable by you and your institution. And sometimes you might opt to not do channels at all. You just want everybody in the community together, at least as a starting place. And then over time, maybe you'll learn about some of the groups that your students want and start to roll those out. That can be done, over time as you learn more. So one of the features that we've talked about a little bit is about the reusability of content in the platform. So if I have a specific question and I'm a student, oftentimes I'm going to come in and use the search feature. The search feature runs through all of the content and questions in the community and is really about trying to connect the student to an answer as quickly as possible. So I'm looking for a math textbook. Looks like nobody has chimed in to say they have one, but I can thumbs up that question to say I have it as well. And then I can also follow that conversation. So now as new answers pop in, I can see them as well. And if somebody raises their hand and volunteers, says they have a math textbook that's available, I can potentially jump on that. But a lot of value to that idea, again, of let's reuse the conversations rather than starting at new every time. Now, you won't always have an answer to your question, so you can also start a new conversation as a participant. You'll see here, there's two ways to participate in the community. One is, essentially, I need help. Can anybody, raising your hand to see if somebody can jump in and provide support. The other is that you just found something useful that you think other members of your community would benefit from. So here's where we see students sharing websites, tools, opportunities, maybe some cool event is taking place and they just want to let their peers know about it. But if I do have a question, and again, let's go back to our textbook example, I can start to type it. So you probably noticed this little pop-up down here. So this is Rosie. I mentioned her a little while ago. She's our technology assistant and she's designed to facilitate the scale and the health of the community. So one of the things she does is as someone goes to ask a question, she's actually searching to see if she thinks there's a solution that could help you right away. So rather than, if that person maybe skipped the search or didn't see it in the search, Rosie's here as kind of a backup to facilitate that reuse piece. So I can click here, see what the answer is, maybe find what I need. Or if I have a new question, I can post it here. So I'm going to post it in the central channel. I'm going to post it around courses and coursework. Now, one other thing that is important as we talked about participation in the community is we want to give students a lot of agency about how they show up. And one of the ways we do that is when the student posts, we want to give them control over the visibility of that post. So I can either post it to everyone, I can post it to everyone, but anonymously. So my fellow students would not know it was me that posted it. Or I can post it just to the moderators, which essentially becomes a private conversation between me and the moderators of the community. This is very important for helping to welcome a broader group of students into the participation process much quicker. So you'll have students who are just shy or kind of uncertain, and this is a way to get them engaging really quickly. Generally, as they get more confident, they'll kind of move to more of an open communication process. But for now, let's say I want to post anonymously, so I'm going to go ahead and just pick that option. So you can see my post came in here, posted anonymously. I should say the anonymous piece only applies to the other students in the community. If you do have a moderator in the space, they can see who that person is. So that not having full anonymity in the community also reinforces good behavior and positive participation. Once that is posted, one of the really important features of a community is that it's not sitting around waiting for people to come to it. It's really about the community almost being an active member of the space. So one way that we do that is when something gets posted, the community reaches out to the other community members to let them know, hey, here's the post, here's the content of that post, and here's a way for you to engage with it, either to, comment on it or to provide an answer or solution for that individual. Those notifications today go out via email, and they go out through our native mobile app. So we do have a mobile app that you and your students can download onto their phone, and then they can get notifications directly on their phone homepage. That's all customizable. So I can go in here, I can customize my notifications at quite a granular level. I want to know right away, I want to know a summary, or I want to snooze this notification for now. And you can modify your mobile notifications through your mobile phone. So we want students, we don't want to, if you want things to be a little quieter than they are, that's fine. We'll give you the opportunity to do that and have control over, how the community is engaging with you. Any questions about that process so far?
Those notifications can be set at the university level as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, so you can set the defaults at the community level, and then each individual can go in and modify their settings based on their personal preferences.
Thank you. There aren't any questions in the chat at this time. I've seen a couple more people pop on, so please, if you have any questions, go ahead and send them in the chat.
Let us know. Awesome. So once something has been posted, you can jump in. Again, you can provide feedback for that individual. I should have mentioned as you're posting, there's also a lot of tools that you can use. So you can bring in pictures, videos, links to other platforms, smiley faces. For academics and learning, we have a few additional tools. You can also provide answers, obviously. And so there's no limit to the number of responses that come in. Sometimes it's one and done. Sometimes you'll have a really lively conversation that gets, 15 or 20 responses. When this gets posted, that individual would also get a notification, as would anybody that's following or participated in the conversation. One thing to note, you can see that I have a little badge here. So Pip is actually a moderator in this community. That's what that little badge means. And I will carry it with me, anywhere I post or am active in the space. If I were a student, I wouldn't have that badge. But as a moderator, I could come in and endorse a student's post. So you're essentially sort of giving students thumbs up or like kudos for a great answer. And it also adds that little visual cue. So if it's important in your community to have kind of the certified response to certain answers, this is a great way to do that. And a great visual way for students to see that. In our peer communities, it's often more student driven with less kind of moderator voice and oversight. So this doesn't get used as often, but there are certain conversations or maybe topics in the community where you want a little bit more moderator participation, and this is a great way to do that. You can also, as a moderator, edit or delete any post in the community. And you can also move it into private status. So if somebody posted something and it's either not appropriate or maybe just not relevant to the other members of the community, you can move that conversation into this moderator only status, which means you can continue to talk to the individual, but the other members of the community would not see that conversation any longer. So it'd get moved out of their view. A couple of other things around the conversation space. So you can see we have really easy tools to help you navigate the community. You can quickly get to topics that have no response. You can also quickly get, as a moderator, to topics that have no moderator response. So possibly a student responded to it, but you just want to check in and as a moderator and make sure that it has a kind of authoritative answer. And you can also see things that have been flagged. So one of the ways that things get flagged in the community is by Rosie. And this is the other sort of main thing that she does in the space. So one is that you can provide us a set of keywords. We have a template set, which you can customize or add to. And if one of those ever appears in a post, Rosie will flag it and escalate it to you. The other thing that she'll do is she runs all the conversations through a sentiment API. So she's measuring the emotion of the conversation. And if it starts to get very negative, like in this case, this student is really struggling, not feeling like they're going to be able to succeed, the system can automatically pick that up, flag it, and escalate it to you. Because if there's a lot of activity in the community, this might be something that really needs to rise to the top. And you either want to jump in quickly, or you just want to, reach out to that individual directly to say like, how you doing? Let's talk through this and provide the level of support that they need. Rosie does not automatically take action on these posts. Partly, that was done on purpose because we don't fully trust, AI always to make the right decision. So she's flagging and making a recommendation to the human beings in your community to come in and take a look. And then it's really up to you. Do I want to reach out to this individual? Do I want to move this into private status? Or do I decide, actually, this is a fine conversation. I'm just going to clear that alert and move on from there. So this is a great feature, and people tell us all the time how much it helps them kind of direct their time and energy where it might be needed in the space. Like there's one other thing I was going to touch on there, but it just popped out of my brain.
There is a question in the chat, and I was trying to answer it here. The question is, does InScribe have an app? And yes, InScribe does have an app. Obviously, we intend on meeting students where they're at. And so Katie has shown, or she will show the LMS integration as well as the online integration. But tell us a little bit more about the app, Katie.
Sure. And I should have said at the outset, I always seem to forget, we're demoing InScribe standalone, but I mentioned it's really designed for integration. Or I think a better way to say it is what you said, Danielle, which is it's designed to meet your students where they are. So one aspect of that is integration. You just tell us the tools that your students are already using on campus and we can integrate into them. So you create your launch point there. You can have many launch points to the same community. So it doesn't have to be like one and done. But we also realized that mobile is a huge part of that. Students aren't in front of their computer all day, every day, like some of us, but they do have their phone with them. So we built a native mobile app, and both iOS and Android, and it allows students to do essentially all of the things that they could do in this web app. And I should say not just students, but all the participants in the community have access to the app and can use it to keep up on what's happening in the space, ask questions, search for information, provide answers and support and solutions for people in the community. And because it's always in your back pocket, you're not asking a student to do 3 clicks to get there or 6 more steps to find their community. It's really about bringing the community to them and making it available when and where they need it. I don't actually have a click-through of the mobile experience as part of our demo today, but I can provide that if you're interested. We can send you something.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. One thing I will just point out, because sometimes moderators ask us about it, is we do have these different views that you can use in the community. This list view or the grid view are great for students because they're kind of, searching through and they like to browse and see what's there. For moderators who are really about kind of clicking through and seeing everything as quickly as possible, we also have this reading pane view. So it gives you the sidebar, almost like your email, where you can just quickly click through each individual item, read it, interact with it, and move on. So that's a really nice efficiency piece, especially if your community might have, 1,000 or 10,000 participants in it. That's very helpful to be able to move through things really quickly. Okay, so I'm going to, I do want to touch on 2 more things really quickly. I need to keep an eye on time. I don't know why I'm so long-winded today. We do have a resources area. The resources area is usually reserved for the moderators. It's a place to put supplemental content, articles, videos. In peer communities, it doesn't get used as much than where we might see it in like an academic community. But what we sometimes see posted here would be, links to the Career Center, opportunities for, events that are taking place, other sort of resources on campus if you wanted to create a little fully formed article. You definitely do not need to come to the table with like a bunch of resources to load in here. In fact, less is more. Start with what you have. And then if you see something happening in the conversation space that you're like, oh, that seems to be a really hot topic, maybe I'll create like a short video about it, or have a student create a short video about it, and then I can post it in here and make that available to them. The other feature that I do think is really relevant and great for these spaces is our new live feature. So this allows you to schedule and promote a synchronous event through your InScribe experience. Generally, a synchronous virtual event is what most people are using it for. So you can see an example here, Friday Math Study Group. We're gonna get together, talk about math. Maybe this is a recurring thing that we do each Friday. And the way that you do it is you just click on live session, give it a title, give it a time. You can use whatever synchronous tool you want. So maybe you're using Zoom, maybe you're using WebEx, maybe you're using Teams. You just drop the link in here, add a little description, and then post it. Everyone will get, in fact, some of you may have joined us today because we posted this in our own community through our live session tool. So what happens is everybody gets a notification when it's posted, and then just before the session starts, everyone gets another notification. So it's a reminder if they didn't add it to their calendar, another quick reminder to jump in and join. The other nice thing about these spaces is it turns this point in time event into a 2-way conversation that can take place before and after the event. So you'll sometimes have students come in, let's say if it's a math study group, and say, here's what I'm struggling with in my homework. Can we talk about this on Friday? Or like, here's a specific problem I haven't been able to get through. I'd really like to go deep on this. So now you already have a set of content that you want to cover. Then you can record that session, post it back into InScribe, and anybody who wasn't able to make it can view that recording and maybe ask a follow-up question. I couldn't be there and you talked about this, but I didn't totally understand it. So you can kind of continue the conversation even after the event has taken place. So we love the power of combining, synchronous with asynchronous to really benefit the entire student groups in a way that you can't when you're only managing those things individually.
I love that you mentioned that some of our attendees today probably joined from this feature. We've seen a significant increase in the number of attendees that we get at these webinars because we're putting them in our support community.
Yeah, we've about doubled
our
participation in these events through that process. So it's definitely a really good way to get in front of your learners. We can vouch for that. So a couple of quick things while we're in here. The community, so we looked at the notification setting area. Community admin gives you an overview of all the participants in your community. You can click into one to see, specifically what they've been up to. You can see our reputation system here, which gives the participants credit for their activity in the community and how they engage with and support each other. You can also see that as an individual, I can include a little more information about myself. I can edit my picture and my display name. So again, I have control over how I appear to my peers in these spaces, and I can kind of show up in the way that makes me feel the most comfortable. We also in here are tracking the activity of your community. So you can see what's happening day to day, who's coming in, how many people are coming in, what types of things they tend to be doing. I always say our demo communities analytics is not always the most beautiful, but in your community, you would see a lot of really interesting patterns here. Sometimes you start to see really interesting peaks and valleys at certain times of year or certain times of the week. And you can learn a little bit about that in terms of when your students need support and what they're looking for. And then you can also export all of this data. So you can get really detailed exports that you can slice and dice any way you want. Look at things like time to response, who's interacting with who's the most active. This is what's included in the community itself. We also have a complete set of learner event data that lives behind your communities and your institution. So that's an enormous data set of like every action that every individual has taken in your community. That can be made available to you through export or API. If you really want to take that larger data set, often some of our institutions who want to do research around the communities or really want to combine that data with information from like the LMS or the SIS, will take that data export and do a lot of different sort of transformational analysis on that as well. Too big to put into the platform, but definitely something we can make available. So anything, I'm going to jump into the integrated views in a second here, Danielle. Anything else you want me to touch on?
Not at this time. It doesn't look like there's any questions in the chat. So if you have any, please feel free to drop them in there. Let's take a look at the integrated view.
Yeah, so one of the things obviously about getting your community to thrive is making sure that your students know about it. One of the ways that we do that is we have a whole communication plan that we can hand to you. It's not complicated, but we've got great templates around how to announce the community, how to encourage students to understand that it's a space for them and by them, and get them in the door and participating. Once they're in there, the notifications will draw them back and bring them back. But another really important aspect of participation is just what we call placement. Where is the community? Is it discoverable? Is it easy to get to? So that's where the mobile app comes in, and that's where these integration points come in. So I'm going to show you two examples of integration, but I'll just reiterate, if you have a place that your students are going and you want to be able to integrate InScribe there, we can do it. Just let us know what that is and we can make it happen. So one of the probably easiest places to integrate is actually your website. So this is an example from one of our institutions, Indiana University. They use InScribe for their School of Medicine. And this is just a simple web page that they built through HTML. And they have a search here that allows you to search your InScribe community. You can, I don't think I'm logged into their community, so let me do this really quick. Let's all right, let's see if that helped. So you can search your community. They have quick links to different aspects of their community that they know are really top of mind for their learners. But this is a website when students were struggling or had questions, they would often come to their website. So they're like, let's just put a support page right here and connect it directly to our InScribe community. And then if I have a question about financial aid, I can click on that. It's going to launch me right over into their space. I'm looking directly at the things related to financial aid, and I can ask my own question, right away from here. So that's a very easy thing to do. We also, I'm already logged in, so that launched me in there directly. Their community is also publicly facing. So they've actually allowed anybody who comes to their website, even if they're not logged in, to be able to browse the content and see the information. So that's part of why we demo it, is that it's already, visible to the public. That's optional. So you might have a community that there's a reason to open up aspects of it publicly and let people view that before they log in. Or you can keep your community totally private. So you have to log in and use your school credentials to access it. Here, we would just connect to your single sign-on system at your institution to provide that access. Another super common level of integration is the LMS. This is Canvas. It probably looks familiar to many of you. There's two ways to integrate in Canvas and other LMS platforms. One is actually integration above the course level. So you can see that we can place a link to your InScribe communities just in your, I don't know what they call this, top level left navigation. And when I clicked on that, it launches me over and I can see all the communities that I have in InScribe. So if you have a peer community, or if you have communities that aren't necessarily tied to a classroom, it can be really helpful to create that link or that opportunity to connect kind of above that level. But of course, we also have many communities that are integrated at the course level. And so switching gears a little bit, ignore the fact that we're in college algebra now. But here's just some examples of how that could work. So you could have a link on the left-hand navigation that takes you there. This link uses our embedded homepage view. So I'm launching you to InScribe, but leaving you in the context of the LMS. So in my college algebra community, I have a couple of channels that I can choose from, and then I can get to this page where I can search for things, ask questions, answer other people's questions. You can also create links within a module. So an individual content item in a module can be a link to InScribe. And when you create those links, you can pre-filter them to particular topics. So if I'm working on stuff in week 1. Now in a peer community, what we see, you probably are not going to link to your peer community from your math class, but oftentimes folks have like they're using the LMS to create an onboarding class, or some kind of, introductory space for students to come and connect with each other. And so we'll see these peer communities get integrated into the LMS in those courses as another way for students to access it or be introduced to it. But a lot of times we also see these integrations happening at different places like websites and other spaces as well. All right.
So I answered a question in the chat. There's a question here in regards to the type of users or the type of students that we typically see in our communities. So do we find that InScribe is used by non-traditional students at most of our partners?
It depends on the partner we're working with. So we do work with a lot of online programs and schools that are serving non-traditional populations. But we also work with a lot of schools who are, more 4-year students are on campus as well. So it depends a little bit on you and what your student population is. And then we might adjust the topics in the community a little bit to reflect back what we think that student population is most likely going to want to connect and talk about. So hello from home might not be relevant for a student population if they're all living together on campus at the same time, for example. But it's really the variety. Now, I will say non-traditional students, online students definitely gravitate toward these spaces because they may not have, especially don't have other places where they can accomplish these goals. Mm-hmm. So we see very high rates of participation from those individuals. All age ranges, we work with students in, groups of students in their 20s all the way up to working adults, and all areas of focus. So everything from general education to, people who are focused on teaching STEM, English language, that doesn't seem to make a difference on how active the students are in these spaces.
Wonderful. Yeah, they had this attendee, Ozzy, had mentioned that their students are typically older and they've been away from college for a while.
Yeah, and those students will, a lot of what we see them talk about, especially in these peer spaces, is their own lived experience and sometimes their hesitation about returning to school. It's interesting that I think adult learners are among the students with the most insecurity about returning to school and the highest level of imposter syndrome. And so we'll see maybe one of those students open up to say, I think we even had this specific example in a community where I'm 50, I'm returning to school, I'm not sure this is the right thing to do, you know, like, can I actually do this at my age? And the number of other students that jumped in to say, me too, I'm in the same boat, let's form a group, we can talk once a week, we'll be here together to support each other, was amazing. So those students in particular almost are the ones that benefit the most from these spaces.
We've seen that example from Fort Hays State University. Can you tell us about that story a little bit?
Well, I think that, what did I just tell you that story?
Yeah. I mean, but they have a peer-to-peer community, right?
They do. So Fort Hays State University, who has both a traditional student population on campus and then a large online population, which is more, individuals in their 30s and 40s who are returning to school. They built a peer community just like this. They actually put all their students together. So it's mixing online, on ground, different programs all in the same space. And at least once a month, we see somebody post in there something about, not sure I can do this. This doesn't necessarily, I don't feel like I have the skills to make this work. And the outpouring of support from their fellow students is always like, gets me every time. Every time it happens, I'm like renewed again about how wonderful students are.
I'm going to drop the link to the success story in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And again, these are great. So if you ever are interested in talking to one of our partners who have built communities like this, Dr. Andrew Feldstein over at Fort Hays State University, Janelle Elias from Rio Salado College are some of the folks that have talked, done talks with us on this topic and would be happy to like jump in and answer questions and share ideas with folks I know. Okay, anything else in the chat you want me to touch on really quick?
No questions at this time, but as you wrap up, I just ask that if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll stick around for a little bit longer after Katie wraps up as well.
Okay, wonderful. Yes, so I'll just reiterate that in this case, creating a space that's really designed by your students where they can go and talk to each other, have those authentic conversations. There are just times when students feel more comfortable hearing from each other or asking questions of each other than having to raise their hand and go to, a figure of authority at the institution. And this is a very easy way to create that opportunity for your learners, but also give you the visibility to learn from those interactions and to improve the student experience over time based on what you learn. So low cost, easy to implement, but the benefits that you and your students get are very, very high. With that, I'll just talk about some other stuff that we have coming up. So any last minute questions, please post them. Happy to address them. We also have a couple of additional webinars happening. Another one this week that's going to be on Thursday with our friends at Indiana University. We're going to talk specifically about the use of InScribe in the classroom to build community and scale support. And then we're going to talk a little more broadly. If you guys are all familiar, Indiana University is actually a system of multiple schools, and they have been using InScribe for several years. And so Maggie, our friend over there, is going to talk about the flexibility of the InScribe platform to really adapt it to multiple different use cases for them and how it's allowed them to actually consolidate their tech stack from, I think it was, 5 different technologies down to 1, but still accomplishing the same goals. And then we have another webinar next week on the 7th, where we'll talk about the use of virtual communities to improve the enrollment and application process. So how do you help applicants feel better connected, get answers more quickly and improve the conversion rate of those individuals into students at your university. I would also love to hear from you. So here's my contact information. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn. Feel free to email me directly. If you'd be interested in a deeper dive of the product, we're happy to provide that. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. I know it's a very busy time of year, so just appreciate your time, and we welcome any feedback or thoughts along the way.